Hello, everybody. Welcome to the PLAYS webinar, second one in the series. This one, we're looking at modelling the interactions between urban development and physical activity. We've got two really interesting speakers to go talk to you. We have Dr. Leandro Garcia from University Belfast, and we have Dr. Heeseo Rain Kwon from the University College London. We're going to start off first with Dr. Leandro Garcia. He's a lecturer in complexity science and public health at Queen's University Belfast Centre for Public Health. He has 10 years of experience in the development and application of systems thinking and complex systems method, including agent-based modelling, to investigate and address public planetary health challenges. Among his current roles, he co-leads the Complexity Public Health Planetary Health Research Cluster at Queen's University Belfast. He's a member of the WHO Collaborating Centre for Research and Training on Complex Systems and Network Science for Non-Communicable Disease Prevention and Control. He also co-leads the UK PRP development theme for systems thinking and complex systems, and is part of the Systems Evaluation Network Organisation Committee. What Leandro is going to be talking about today, he's going to present work investigating the potential impacts of large-scale recreational and transport-related physical activity promotion strategies on sustainable development goal outcomes in cities of high, middle, and low-income countries. With that, I'll hand you over to Leandro. Leandro.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I will just share my screen and then we start. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will speak today about synergies between large-scale urban changes for physical activity promotion and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a work that we conducted and then published in 2021, together with others, as actually this paper encompasses a range of activities or outputs. And the ABM agent-based model is just one part of the whole paper. And the rationale for the paper is that the health of humans and our planet hangs in balance, as we all know. And the UN SDGs lay out objectives for saving the planet and enhancing quality of life. And while not quite a threat to planetary existence as climate change or global poverty, physical inactivity still accounts for 5 million deaths per year. So we try to investigate how large-scale physical activity promotion strategies might have synergies with the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. So in this aspect of multi-solving for multiple problems we face today in different countries. And for this paper, we had four main aims. The first one was to describe the unresolved physical inactivity pandemic, the potential synergies with the UN SDG agenda. Then next, we try to identify plausible links between at-scale physical activity promotion and SDG achievement. The third objective, which is related with the ABM, was to explore the possible impact of these at-scale physical activity promotional strategies on both physical activity and the SDG-related outcomes across high, middle, and low-income country city types, and I'll speak more about these city types in the next slides. And lastly, based on these three, the outputs of these three first aims, we synthesized the results in sector-specific recommendations to guide policy, research, and action. And here in this slide, I show very briefly what we found in terms of linkages between the physical activity promotion strategies and the 17 SDGs. So we gather information from three different sources: from the WHO Global Action Plan for Physical Activity, from the knowledge of physical activity experts and from the scientific literature to try to understand what are the possible linkages between these physical activity promotion strategies and all the SDGs. And we found that the strategies that we investigated were based on the 8 best investments for physical activity promotion. And what we found is that among these 8 strategies, 15 out of the 17 SDGs could be linked and then also have synergies and trying to multi-solve the different issues we observe across the globe. So this is just to set the scene where the agent-based model sits within this paper. So after we identify these linkages, we use these information, these findings, to inform the time. The agent-based model had as a purpose to investigate the potential impacts of large-scale recreational and transport-related physical activity promotion strategies on 6 SDG-related outcomes. And these outcomes were first road traffic deaths, transportation mode share, convenient access to public transport, levels of fine particulate matter, access to public open spaces, and levels of CO2 emissions. And beyond these 6 outcomes, we also were interested in observing the effects on recreational physical activity. And beyond the novelty of investigating these 6 or 7 outcomes together, we also aim to do that for different types of cities. So we designed 3 cities as abstract representations of common cities in high, middle, and low-income countries. These cities were not meant to resemble any particular real city, but were instead designed to represent cities which were similar across a core set of characteristics. And what we did, however, was to use information from real-world cities to inform the attributes of each one of these abstract cities. And we'll speak more about the icons you can see here in this slide when we only spoke specifically about the environment that we model within the ABM. So this was the first ABM that included 2 physical activity behaviors, each one shaped by individual, interpersonal, and environmental factors, and 3 different cities, each one offering a unique environmental and socioeconomic features. This ABM was based on a conceptual model that contained 2 main elements. So on the top bubble, you can see the factors and the relationships that shape recreation physical activity practice. And in the bottom bubble, you can see the factors and relationship affecting transportation mode choices. And you can see there's a part of these 2 bubbles that are overlap, which are elements that affect both types of behaviors. This overarching structure was informed by the socio-ecological model for physical activity and elements of social practice theories. And decisions, and the decision model was governed by people's behavior, let me start again. So the decision models governing people's behavior was informed by elements of discrete choice theory, opinion dynamics, and multi-level theory of behavior. And the general structure of both bubbles was also informed by previous work, especially on developing leisure time physical activity and how to use those conceptual models to develop agent-based models of leisure time physical activity. And then we expanded that to include the transportation behavior as well. In terms of environments and agents, so before I go ahead, I'll just very briefly say that the full model description followed the ODD+D protocol, and it can be found in the article's supplementary material. And the model itself, the ABM itself, and all outputs generated by from the model are in our OSF page. And the link to that page is in the article, which is free to access. So the environment was a 65 by 65 grid with non-contiguous contiguous sides. And each square patch was equivalent to a quarter of a square kilometer. And the total area of the environment was around 1,000 square kilometers. And these dimensions were based on the total area in the range of what is observed in medium to large size cities around the world, and a meaningful path length or area for calculated distance to locations, and also to adequately accommodate behavioral, interpersonal, and environmental factors that are relevant for this model. For instance, the number of spaces for physical activity practice within an agent's perception radius. Within each one of these cities, abstract cities, each one of these patches were composed by different attributes or represented different attributes. So here's an example of a high-income environment. I'll just select the laser point here. So you can see there are 4 colors here. The yellow color represents high-income area, the red color middle-income area, and here the center one, the low-income area, and in the very middle, the downtown. It's of course very segregated. Of course, we know cities are not as segregated as this example shows, but it's, and again, an abstract representation. So we are basically saying that this is largely a high-income area, a mid-income area, low-income area, and the downtown. And each one of these patches had an area level income, as I showed you, but also a transport infrastructure score, meaning how good it is for car, for walking and traveling, for walking and cycling, and also representing the quality for public transport. And each one of these patches could be populated either by a space for recreational physical activity, either public or private. So these are these green patches here. Workplaces, which are the white patches here. Other places for social interaction, which are represented here by the purple patches. Public transportation stops, which are the red flags, and residential locations when none of these other spaces was defined. Here is just an example. So of course, for visualization purposes, the space was of course much more, or the possible spaces or locations were much more distributed and better distributed according to the type of site of city, but also the income area. And the environment then was informed by real-world information from real-world cities, and that included income per capita, income inequality, population density, distribution of jobs, outdoor air pollution, transport mode shares, coverage quality of road infrastructure, walk infrastructure, etc. And this information came from 3 specific cities. So for the high-income city, we use Phoenix in the US, for the mid-income city, Bogota in Colombia, and from the low-income city, data from Accra. And the spatial characteristics were sourced from multiple fonts. For instance, for the city boundaries, we use the city's webpage and the humanitarian data exchange. For distribution environmental elements, we use SRI, OpenStreetMaps, Google Places API, etc. In terms of agents, we modeled 1,000 adult persons with the following attributes, with a range of attributes. So, ranging from residential location, the income level, the ownership of car, motorcycle, bicycle, the size of their personal network, the preferred place to do recreational physical activity, their intention to engage in recreational physical activity, workplace location, number of other locations they visit over the week, and travel mode choices over the week for each one of these destinations. So this was the general aspects or attributes of these ABM in terms of environment and agents. In terms of scenarios, we modeled 6 scenarios based first on the business as usual case. And the next 3 models, or scenarios 2 and 3 and 4, were selected among those we observed from the list of all 8 best investments for physical activity that were very well linked with some of the SDG outcomes or indicators, sorry. So in the second scenario, we aim to reduce inequalities in public transport. In the third one, we reduce inequalities in public recreational spaces. And in the fourth one, inequalities in walking and cycling infrastructure. And we did that in the 3 scenarios. We reduced inequalities by slightly improving what we observe in the best served area, and then bringing every other space to the same levels of services of this best served place. Then we combine what we observed in scenarios 2, 3, and 4, these 3 interventions. And lastly, we did the same combination, but added increasing costs of car trips. And these strategies were implemented after 1 valid year in the model. The model was, I will show you in the next slides, run to be equivalent to 10 years. Okay, so every time step was equivalent to 1 real world week, and the model was run to be equivalent to 10 years. So in the general process in this ABM is that first, let me show you again with the laser point, we update the intention to engage in recreational physical activity, considering aspects like past behavior, behavior of personal social network, behavior of the community at large, and also that is modified or moderated by the quality and accessibility of spaces for recreational physical activity. That then leads to the individual deciding to engage or not in recreational physical activity, and if it does engage, the weekly frequency of activity. And then every 4 time steps every month, each individual would reevaluate modes of transportation to every one of these places, so to work, to other destinations, including the recreational physical activity space. And to reassess that, each person would then consider their vehicle ownership, travel distance, travel costs, their past travel behavior, the behavior of their personal social network of the community at large, and the quality of the transport infrastructure in their neighborhood. And once that is considered, then they travel to these different places, and then every four time steps every month, they reevaluate the modes of transportation. I will show you very briefly some of the elements about the selection of spaces, or how we operationalize every step or every element of that flow chart. So we have, I'm not going through all the equations here, but just to show that for each one of these main decision points, people had to select the best place to be physically active based on their perception of the quality of that space, the accessibility to that space, how affordable that space is for depending on the person's income. So this is what I just said. Then we had the recreational physical activity behavior. And again, I'm not going through this. I'm happy for these slides to be shared with you after, in case you want to see the details of the equations. But just to say that the physical activity behavior was based on an extension of the continuous opinions and discrete actions model. So that means that intention to be physically active would be, which is a continuous variable, would be updated every week, every time step. And based on the intention, each person would then decide to be to do recreational physical activity or not in that particular week. And that intention is based on the person's past behavior, in the behavior of their social network and the behavior that agent perceives of their larger environment, the community at large. And each one of these factors have a different weight that is assigned based on a previous work published by us in 2017. And the selection of modes of transport follow a two-step or two-stage approach. So first, all modes of that person did not own were eliminated. So if a person didn't have a bicycle, for instance, so cycling wouldn't be an option. And then if two or more modes remained, then we did a utility calculation to find the mode that had the highest utility for that particular destination. And again, I'll leave these slides to you so you can see after if you want. So it contains elements associated with infrastructure for that particular mode, cost, past travel behavior and travel time, and the effects of the person's network on community behavior or community past behavior. So very briefly then, the results and main lessons. I won't show many figures or tables of this paper because they're very complex, very complicated tables and very long, to be honest, tables and figures, but this is just to show you the amount of results we had to assess. But I brought here some of the main lessons that we got from this model. So the first one is that overall, we saw more positive and significant changes in low and middle-income country city types. So we saw much more significant decrease in car trips, road traffic deaths, PM2.5 and CO2 emissions, and increases in public transport, walk and cycling trips compared with the high-income city type. And the sprawling high-income city type, we only saw significant changes when the disincentive of car use was also applied. So only then we could see decreases in car trips, in road traffic deaths and CO2 emissions, and increases in public transport, walk and cycling trips. Also, we saw that some unintended consequences could emerge. So for instance, when we reduce the spatial inequalities in cycling and walking infrastructure in the low-income city, that of course resulted in increases in walking and cycling, but at the same time, an increase in road traffic deaths and a decrease in public transport trips. We also saw that in scenarios 5 and 6, where we combine interventions, we saw super additive results and mitigation of unintended consequences, which is a very significant, important, interesting result. And also the benefits can take at least 5 years to manifest. So just to finalize here my part of the presentation. So some of the limitations of our model was first, that was a very simplified spatial complexity and representation that we use in our model. People's decision-making process and weights might differ across countries, of course, and between people within the same city, and we didn't account for these differences in our model. There might be other individual factors that can affect recreation and travel behavior. And of course, these three cities don't represent the full spectrum of real cities, even inside these three categories of common cities in low-income countries, in middle-income countries, and in high-income countries. Some of the strengths of our work was, again, first, this was the first model to include both physical activity, both types of physical activity behavior, 3 different cities with unique environmental and socioeconomic features, 6 scenarios, and we had a range of 7 outcomes. I'm going to stop here just to say that, again, I will share this slide. This slide set also contains other technical aspects of the paper if you want to see more about it too. That's all, Ricardo. Thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you. That was excellent. So just to remind people, if you wanted to ask them questions, we've got a couple of minutes for questions, then please type them into the Q&A box. Actually, I have one. How did you get the social data for the cities? What, specifically like the social networks between them?
Yeah, so the social network data didn't come specifically from City because it wasn't available that easily. We use information from what have been identified through meta-analysis and other systematic reviews about the average size of a person's social network, and also some previous work, for instance, the Dunbar number, which is a contentious number, but it says, gives some indication of what is the amount of information a person can handle. That was specifically used to indicate the amount of information coming from the community at large that one agent would consider. So we use some of these information that came or we tested through other over the literature.
Right. And one other question, how did you decide which policies policy scenarios you wanted to test?
Yeah, so we started using the list of 8 best investments for physical activity. That was our starting point. And then we selected the 3 or the 2 ones that are more directly connected with recreational and transportation behavior. So that were changes in the physical activity, in the recreation, the parks, to open spaces and parks, recreation physical activity, then public transport and changes on walking and cycling infrastructure. So things that are largely associated with changes in the urban form. So these were this was the way we selected, and we aim to reduce inequalities as one thing that was discussed and agreed in general as a team, but could be anything else, could be a different strategy.
Okay, one final thing, it's a geeky question. It's always a geeky question from me. What did you program it in?
We program in NetLogo.
Oh, right, and that's available on your site for people to play.
It is available on the OSF page. The full model, the link is available in the paper, but at the beginning of the slide set, I put my email address. You can contact me. I'm happy to direct to the page or even send myself.
I probably will. It looks a really interesting model. Right, I think we're going to move on now, and we're going to, next talk is from Dr. Heeseo Rain Kwon, and she's currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the Bartlett School of Planning at the University of London, and she's also a visiting research fellow at the University of Reading. She's going to be presenting ongoing research that builds an agent-based model using spatial, population and health data from Greater Manchester. This model examines the feedback loops where citizens switch from the main mode of transport to non-car modes, increasing physical activity, leading to better health and further encouraging mobility, and more consumer demand for carless urban environments leads to pro-health urban development and land building and change that facilitates further mode switch away from cars and therefore creating a virtuous cycle. Well, I'm really looking forward to that, and I will hand over to you, Rain.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Okay, let me share the screen.
Right, I can see that. That's
awesome.
Super. Great.
Great. Okay, so brilliant. Yes, my name is Rain. Thank you for the introduction, Ricardo. So yeah, many thanks for the opportunity to present my research at this session. So today, my presentation is on using ABM to conceptualize healthier urban development and healthier travel behavior. I don't have the model results yet because we are currently in the process of gathering the interview and survey data. So this presentation will be more focused on the model design. I will first give a quick explanation of my approach to behavioral modeling and ABM first to set the scene, and then go dive into this project. So my broad research approach is applying complexity theory in urban planning to inform policies for positive behavioral change. So I think a lot of the audience in this webinar are probably very familiar with ABM, but yeah, this involves modeling of individual agent behaviors and their interactions in feedback loops with system level behaviors. So agents interact, system-wide patterns emerge to influence future interactions. I am especially interested in behavioral theories, and Leandro just mentioned quite a few of them. So I was very happy to see many theories used. And I'm very interested in linking behavioral theories with types of behavior data, analysis methods, and rules for behavioral modeling. And I am very much interested in applying human behavioral modeling on a spatial temporal model as an attempt to pursue the 3 dimensions of human environment dynamic modeling. So spatial, temporal, and human decision-making complexities. And I use agent-based modeling a lot because it has particular strength in simulating human decision-making dynamics and its interaction with the environment. And NetLogo is a widely used platform for ABM, as Leandro used this as well. And it conceptualizes 4 types of agents: patches, turtles, slings, and the observer. And in today's presentation, I'll be talking about the patches and turtles quite a lot. Sleuth urban growth model is a widely known cellular automata model in urban geography. And in my previous research for my PhD, I implemented Sleuth in NetLogo and added residents on top as turtles. So I'm just going to quickly explain this because my current project with Phase builds on my PhD model. So in my PhD model, I looked at the feedback loop where more residents switched from car to non-car. This would lead to less urbanization along the road networks, and then less urban sprawl would then further encourage the mode switch to non-car. And I won't go into details, but this is the results I got from my PhD research. And the key policy implications was about the importance of having both top-down and bottom-up approaches for behavioral change. And moving on to the project that I'm currently doing with Phase. So mode switch from car to non-car comes with health benefits like physical activities and air quality. So quite naturally, I repurposed this PhD model with a strong focus on health and health inequality for a project funded by Population Health Agent-based Simulation Network Phase, which is a network funded by UK PRP. I'm using data from Greater Manchester, linking with the 20-minute neighbourhood concept being pursued by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, GMCA, under the strategy called Streets for All. So I'm closely collaborating with the experts at University of Reading and Manchester for this project. Just to locate the case study area, Greater Manchester is in North of England with population of around 2.8 million. And there have been many existing studies on linking physical activity as a main risk factor, or physical inactivity, as a main risk factor of health issues, and the impact of built environment on physical activity. Also the relationship between built environment and travel behavior, as well as how urban development, decision-making, for example, like the policy making, investment and development, these affect the shaping of the urban development. Shaping of the built environment. However, not many studies have looked at these all together, and that's what we're trying to do in this research using complex systems theory and agent-based modeling. There are many elements of healthy cities, and this project focuses on land use and transportation, walking and cycling, access to green area, and essential functions. We talked to some officers at the Transport for Greater Manchester, TFGM, and identified a need for improved policy understanding for promoting active mobility and positive health outcome in the context of post-COVID market changes related to urban land use change and the changes in the travel demands with the increasing working from home. So yeah, this is a conceptual framework for this model. It examines the feedback loops where the citizens switch from car to non-car modes. This increases physical activity as well as air quality, leading to better health and further encouraging active mobility because citizens are more able to engage in active mobility and travel, and more consumer and user demand for carless urban environment would then feed into pro-health urban development in terms of land and building use change, which can be captured in the 20-minute neighborhood or 15-minute city metrics, which then facilitates further mode switch away from car. So it's a feedback loop here and then another feedback loop here, creating a virtuous cycle. So as for data, we're using census individual microdata for the travel mode switch. And I'm currently performing interviews and surveys with real estate firms as well as experts at Transport for Greater Manchester, GMCA, University of Manchester, to form the land and building use change scenarios. And in this model, we are looking at residents in employment only because the UK census asks question on main mode of transport only for work. And also this is in line with this model's focus on the impact from work from home. So this is what the model interface looks like on NetLogo. This was made just to illustrate what it looks like in Greater Manchester. These patches are in 100 by 100 meter grid cells. So this model uses GIS extension a lot and then uses spatial data. So, for example, the building use maps are loaded by building height for residential, retail, and office. The multiple deprivation map by also lower suburban area, and the NHS disease prevalence data by GP practice points. So this is the NHS quality and outcomes framework data. I created Voronoi polygon maps for each of the 8 disease types that we think that closely relate to physical activity, including obesity, coronary heart disease, heart failure, hypertension, COPD, cancer, diabetes, depression, and mental health issues. So I'm working very closely with a PhD candidate colleague called Matthew at Reading. Matthew has a first degree from medical school and produced a very comprehensive lit review on the physical activity and health interdependencies. So building on this, we are currently establishing the rules in the model regarding the expected impact of increased physical activity on the improvements of different NCDs. And so ideally in this model, we want to see how increased physical activity can decrease the prevalence of some of these NCDs. And our hypothesis is that this would be seen differently in different parts of Greater Manchester. And the GIS data that we load on this model directly links to the patch attributes. So this is like 100 by 100 meter grid, each one of these. So for example, this patch here is in borough number 3. Greater Manchester has 10 boroughs, and then has 33 meter office space. 23% of the population here are deprived. And then it has 2.6% of the population with obesity and 14% with depression. So we've also placed 21,430 residents from the 2011 census data on the residential patches in their boroughs. So they're shown in blue and green dots, which are their main mode of transport, green being non-car and blue being car. So within the boroughs, we've used the multiple deprivation map to locate the residents, matching with their individual deprivation information in the census data, because of the privacy, the exact residential location of the of the people in the census data are not given. So we thought using the deprivation index would be a good way to assign the location for these turtles. And then each of these turtles have distinctive socioeconomic properties based on the individual level census data, including like age, deprivation, education, number of dependent children in the household, general health, occupation, etc. The list goes on. And each turtle also has travel-related properties like distance to work, number of cars, and main mode of travel to work from home information, place of work, etc. So healthier travel behavior will be measured in the metric of mode share of car. And as of 2011, Greater Manchester has 67% of mode share of car. To measure healthier urban development, we're using the 15-minute city metrics of density, proximity, and diversity in line with the Greater Manchester's vision for 20-minute neighborhood included in its Streets for All policy. So individual turtles, these residents, will have the related variables calculated within that logo, like the distance to work, green area, retail, healthcare, education, entertainment, etc. So, for example, this specific resident here doesn't have a nature cluster within 2 kilometers. This is 0, but then has retail and office clusters within 2 kilometers of its radius. So yeah, that logo is useful in calculating these things very quickly. Also, these individual turtles will have distinct values for density and diversity in 2 kilometer radius from their residential location. So this will be population and building density, as well as diversity in terms of building use and population characteristics. So many of these individual resident attributes will be used to calculate the likelihood of each of the residents switching their main mode of transport from car to non-car, linking with behavioral theories, most likely theories of planned behavior and interpersonal behavior. And this is the rule for mode switch that I used for my previous PhD model. And I'm currently building something similar to suit the context of Greater Manchester. And this has been one of the questions that we've been asking in our stakeholder interviews in Greater Manchester. And the children variable, I think we will be putting a lot of weight in it. And this is, I'm probably not going to go through this in detail, but this is this is to illustrate how the behavioral rules can be written on that logo for this mode switch behavior. These are the rules that I used for my PhD model, which I will apply quite similarly in this model for Greater Manchester. And with the data loaded, we see some interesting spatial patterns already. For example, proximity to nature, retail, office, and health deprivation, which we're examining along with the related publications by Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And I've also attempted to link the NHS health data with the census individual residents by randomly assigning the disease prevalence based on, so hypothetically, this turtle has hypertension and obesity, and this is an attempt to link the census data with the NHS disease prevalence data, because the NHS disease prevalence data doesn't have the individual information, and the census data has the individual information, but only has very brief health related questions. But the I'll be refining this methodology quite a lot by considering some other census attributes like health, deprivation, age, etc. And this would be different for different disease types as well. So I'm currently getting lots of advice from our health experts in the University of Manchester. So I have been experimenting with the 2011 census data until now. The microdata for 2021 census is supposed to be released soon, and it's hopefully in the next two 3 months. They said, over late spring, early summer. So I'm looking forward to adding that in and making simulations. The aim is to run the model from 2021 until 2040 to test the likelihood of Greater Manchester achieving its vision for 50% mode share of walking, cycling, and public transport. So in other words, how likely that the mode share of car, currently 67% based on 2011 data, would go down to 50% by 2040. So our aim is to also generate some top-down and bottom-up policy implications for behavioral change for both residents' pro-health travel decisions, as well as real estate and planning actors' pro-health urban development decisions with regards to realizing vision for a 20-minute neighborhood in a way that pursues health and health equity. And lately, I'm classifying the working resident hurdles into those who are more able to work from home and those who need to commute, which has a lot of implications for socioeconomic divide, actually. And we are currently setting the policy scenarios within the model based on the GMCA and the FGM's initiatives for active travel, and also reviewing policy. We've reviewed latest documents to set land and building use change scenarios. And we've started our interviews to receive feedback on this, especially from policy experts and real estate actors. This closely relates to trends like work from home affecting retail and office buildings turned to residential in the city center, especially with the recent expansion of permitted development rights, which doesn't require planning permission to switch their use from retail or office to residential. So this trend may encourage local living and 20-minute neighborhood lifestyle, but at the same time, this would have different effects on different people, as lower income population tends to have jobs that largely require commuting. So this is not going to go in detail, but this is an example of how we are asking the experts in GM in real estate, public policy, and planning and health in terms of their feedback on our scenarios for work from home, as well as land building use change and population location. So for example, for scenario 1, we want to set it commute 5 days a week, scenario 2, 3 days a week, scenario 3, commute 1 days a week or less. And then for the commute 3 days a week scenario, we want to set, for example, classifying GM land patches into 3: A, Manchester and Borough city centers; B, local centers; C, suburban neighborhoods. And we want to make the difference between non-deprived and deprived, because we are very interested in looking at the equity aspect. So for scenario 2, we want to say, for example, in A, we would decrease the office and retail by 5%, increase residential by 5%, etc. And then we want to make this change every year within NetLogo. So making a tick every year from 2023 until 2030, and then let the simulation run until 2040. And then this would be also complemented by the policy scenarios related to the GM's Streets for All and 20-minute neighborhood initiatives. So and in summary, it'll be interesting to see how the land and building use changes in the built environment, the work from home trend, and the 20-minute neighborhood initiative affect and get affected by the residents' hard to non-car mode switch, with a focus on how this all relates to increased physical activity, health benefits, and health inequalities in different parts of Greater Manchester. So yeah, this project involves quite a lot of spatial analysis and the use of real data from Greater Manchester. Thank you very much. If I didn't go over time.
No, well, thank you very much. That was incredibly interesting. So again, quick reminder to people, if anybody wants to ask questions, please put them up in the question and answer section and I'll ask them. But I have two immediate off the back. Right, I was really interested in the reduction of your synthetic population. Now, I've got two questions for that really. What difficult was that? And my answer very. How happy are you got a good representation of what is Manchester in that synthetic population?
So this is so basically I'm using the CSV extension within that logo to directly load the census individual microdata. So that represents around 2% of the Greater Manchester population in 2011. That's right.
Selected. Oh, that's interesting.
That's right. Yes. So this is this is a, I think it's such a good opportunity that logo presents, how we can actually set the attributes of each individual turtles based on the real data. So
cities. Is that available that micro census data? Is that available for a lot of other cities?
So yes, it is the UK census data that you can request to receive in like, I think it's local authority level individual micro data, which in the Excel or CSV file you would have each row as a person. So with all of the questions, what they answered. So yeah, so it's really very useful data. And in terms of synthetic population, that's a good that's something that I want to actually answer. Is this 2011 population is pre-COVID data. So when we extrapolate to 2040, we want to, well, first we want to we want to have a look at the micro data when 2021 data comes up, but then that would be quite tricky because how people answered during COVID times, not, yeah, it's a unique situation that they answered. So my current thought is probably continuing to use the 2011 data as the pre-COVID, and then post-COVID we want to move the population based on our scenarios, so that higher income population who are able to work from home, who are currently living in city center, for example, or near the more urban areas, or maybe make 5% move out to more outskirts because they can with the work from home, and then that would make that choice happen every year for the next 10 years or something like that. So and that would have a very interesting impact on the equity aspect, because the people who have that ability to make that move would be the ones who are in higher income band, as well as who can work from home. So that would have interesting impact in terms of how the 20-minute or 15-minute city kind of neighborhoods get formed, because it would also have impact on different work from home scenarios, having more kind of affluent neighborhoods, their local centers more flourishing with the increased demand for local living as more people work from home in that areas, whereas the similar I guess investment or demand or vibrance wouldn't be seen in other parts that are more deprived. So this would be very interesting for the GMCA, especially the policy economics type of projection, and how it relates to the 20-minute neighborhood physical activity and also health and health inequality. So where this is it's a pretty exploratory attempt to look at these related factors in holistically, applying complex systems theory. And currently I'm seeing basically a lot of different aspects that require further investigation, and this project cannot carry on. So I think it'll probably have to stop at some point, and then making suggestions for further investigation in this area, etc.
It's an incredibly interesting model. I like the fact that it probably be plug and play with different cities. But one of the things I know, if Rich was here, he'd be saying, well, one of the things that comes environmental impact assessments. Sounds like it could really be used nicely for that. You could say, okay, I'm going to change this part of the city to something else. And because you've got the health incomes there, the health, I think that'd be really interesting. Right. I have a question for both of you, if you don't mind. Leandro, if that's okay, if you can unmute, because I'm going to ask. So it's a question this. So both of you have talked a lot about behavioral theory, and I'm kind of interested in how easy you think, or how much there is a link between behavioral theory and translating that into ABMs. What has been your experiences with that? So if you want to go first.
Yeah, I can go first. My experience in general is that, in general, these models are very linear at the beginning. So there's an exercise from the researcher to make it, transform that linear model into something more dynamic. Of course, the dynamicity is implied, but the diagram itself is very linear. So I think there's this also the exercise of very clearly saying, well, where the feedbacks are, to make it more dynamic and more processual would make them more adequate for an ABM model. So this has been my experience so far. One thing that I think it's very useful for any modeler is to start very early in the process. Put on the paper what your mental model is about what the theory of change, or not the theory of change, but the behavior change process is, and then start from there. So of course we all have lots of assumptions or informed by different models. So at the very early stage, put that on paper and then start adapting from there based on the adequate models and theories for your ABM.
Yeah, I think I have a comment as well. So I've looked at behavior theories and how to use it for behavior modeling quite in detail for my PhD research, and it's especially useful for selecting variables. That's probably a very obvious use of these behavior theories, and also it's important to link to see what kind of behavioral determinants that each of these theories contain, because also in the context of the case study area, and that would involve quite a bit of, unless you're very familiar yourself with the case study area, quite a bit of liaison with the local authorities or the people there to see what kind of factors are and determinants are especially applicable for that behavior in that particular context. Like, for example, just very quick example would be like cycling behavior in some parts of Northern Europe could be, well, not Northern Europe maybe, could be, a lot of it would be connected to like pro-environmental values that people have, that's identified as one of the key variables, whereas in other parts of the world, it's very different, and how it relates to social class is also very different, and the relationship between car use and social class also very different in different parts of the world. So that's something to very much keep in mind. And I also think behavioral theories are not just useful for setting the variables, but also designing interventions or policies to impact behavioral change, like nudge theory, diffusion of innovation theory, and when especially looking at like social network analysis and etc. Then what to do with the findings, how to then try to affect people to make that change.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I think we both had two really good speakers there. Thank you very much indeed to Linda and to Rain, and show your appreciation with the virtual things on the side.